So the paper that we published this month in Thorax looks at gait speed, a simple measure of physical performance, as a predictor of readmission in patients who've been hospitalised with an acute exacerbation of COPD. And in terms of background, hospitalisations for an acute exacerbation of COPD are major events in the natural disease process. And they're very important because they're a very common cause of hospital admission. So 1 in every 8 patients who comes to hospital comes with their COPD. And also they cost the NHS well over £800 million per annum. But most importantly, exacerbations of COPD are associated with significant morbidity and mortality for patients. And if we look at audits that have been done in the UK, about a third of patients come back to hospital within 90 days of their hospital discharge. And so recently there's been a lot of interest in identifying and trying to risk stratify patients who are at risk of coming into hospital to see if we could intervene in a positive way to try and prevent that happening. And because of this has been a problem that really is quite high on the research and political agenda. In my research, I'm very interested in physical performance, and that is because it's something that is amenable to intervention, and in particular, it is responsive to exercise modalities such as pulmonary rehabilitation, which we know can improve physical performance and can actually reduce the odds of readmission. However, there have been no prospective studies looking at physical performance in patients in hospital. And this may be because traditional ways that we assess physical performance with field walking tests may present some logistical difficulties in acute wards because there's limited space. And often these tests can be intolerable to patients who are very unwell. And my research interest is into something called the 4-metre gait speed. And this is a very simple measure of physical performance that is being developed in the elderly population. And it's simply asking patients to walk at their normal walking pace over a 4-metre course. Because it's such a familiar activity to patients walking, it is readily acceptable even in those who are acutely unwell. And because it requires so little space, it can be done in the home and even at the hospital bedside. But most importantly, this test has been shown in older people to be a consistent predictor of adverse outcomes such as mortality, disability, hospitalisation, and even falls. Now, we have recently published data showing that the 4-metre gait speed in COPD is a reliable measure, that it's valid, that it correlates well with well-established measures in COPD, and that it is also responsive to interventions such as pulmonary rehabilitation. But what we haven't yet done is examined the prognostic information that the gait speed can give us. And so the aim of this study was really to assess the ability of the 4-metre gait speed to predict readmission in patients hospitalised with an acute exacerbation of COPD. And this is the first prospective study to examine physical performance on the day of hospital discharge. And what we showed was that the 4-metre gait speed was feasible in patients hospitalised with an acute exacerbation of COPD. We showed that if you had a slower gait speed, this was associated with increased odds of readmission within 90 days, that it was associated with increased cumulative bed days in hospital, and that there was a reduced time to readmission. And I think this is important research because this is a real-time clinical tool that clinicians can use in routine clinical settings on the ward to provide them information about how likely a patient is to come into hospital.